And with that, I would like to introduce our amazing panel. Panelists, if you will hop on, if everybody would just kind of quickly go around, maybe Elissa, Rachel, Mark, then Nick, just 10, 15 seconds on who you are, kind of what your role is in today's world of data and analytics. And there you go. Let's rock and roll.
All right, you said my name first. So Elissa Fink, many of you might know me as former CMO of Tableau, or some of you might, and I'm a huge fan of ATUG, so congrats on just what an amazing group. I'm currently serving on some boards and advising companies, and I am a data advocate to the point, to the heart, to the brain, to the soul for all of those companies. I'm constantly pushing them to use data. So real pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Nelson and team. It's really nice to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elissa. Rachel.
Yeah, hi, my name is Rachel Stuve. I'm currently a director of data science at Anthem in the healthcare space. I think we've all heard of Anthem. Had a background in healthcare analytics as well as manufacturing and sales, which goes from the whole gamut of visualization and data analysis to very pure machine learning, automation as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Mr. Mark Jackson.
Hey, Mark Jackson. I run the BI program at Piedmont Healthcare. We're a 11 hospital system in the Georgia area. Had the honor of being named a Tableau Zen Master in the past, as well as Exasol Expert, which is the database we use for analytics. And I've been at Piedmont for about, I guess, almost 11 years now.
Awesome. And Nick.
Hey, Nelson. Thanks for having me on. Nick Heigerick, Manager of Systems Development at Oldcastle Infrastructure. And my focus is kind of on all things development, but was originally brought in to lead the BI and analytics for Oldcastle. And am helping just grow that into so much more as we try to bring our manufacturing group into kind of the 21st century with data-driven focus.
That's awesome. And just to set ground rules for everybody, so we've got a number of questions that we want to throw out to the panel. We're not going to stop a great discussion, so you definitely want to dig into it with everyone. And again, the goal is we've got so many great kind of developers and analysts and champions who are amazing at doing things. And today, I think we also have some great leaders who have joined us as well. So our heart today is to really kind of get behind the mindset of you all in positions of leadership in the space of data and analytics. And we would love for you to just share your thoughts and your direction on everything. So with that, I'll open this up with our very first question. So a little bit of backstory. Per the top 20 trends in data and analytics for 2020, Gartner believes that we will begin to see a decline of the dashboard, stating dynamic stories with more automated and consumerized experiences will replace visual, point-and-click authoring and exploration. As a result, the amount of time users spend using predefined dashboards will decline. The shift to in-context data stories means that the most relevant insights will stream to each user based on their context, role, or use. These dynamic insights leverage technologies such as augmented analytics, NLP, streaming anomaly detection, and collaboration. The question for our panel: do you believe interactive visual analysis will be in greater or lesser use in 5 years? Elissa, we'd love to have you kick us off with your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good points, Nelson, thank you. But I think interactive visual analysis will be in greater use. Now, the passive dashboard, well, first of all, dashboards will always be in use. They're great monitoring tools, a quick glance, you know the dashboard, you know what to look for. Blam, things are on or they're off. It tells you to explore or not to explore, ask questions or not ask questions. So I think to that extent, the dashboard will always live, I think. But in particular, I think what's interesting about this question is I do think interactive visual analysis is going to continue to explore. And all those technologies that Gartner cites are going to be part of that. In fact, because the information streaming to you is going to be more in context, more relevant, instead of seeing these passive dashboards or visualizations that don't quite hit what your interest is and you sort of go by them, it's actually going to engage you, and it's going to engage you to ask the next questions. And as much as we'd like to believe, and maybe the day will come when AI and these new technologies will deliver exactly the information directly to the electrodes in our brain, and we won't even have to think, that's not going to be what's going to happen. It's going to surface stuff for you that is in context, and you, the human, being creative and having many experiences that the machine doesn't necessarily bring to it, are going to ask additional questions. So I actually think those technologies are going to bring people more to data and more to wanting to be active with data. And there's no better way to understand data than to have it be visual. Steve just proved that. I mean, everything he showed was so on the money to prove that. It's just going to engage people even more. And the information being more contextually relevant can only add to that formula. So I don't know. I mean, Mark or Nick, Rachel, your thoughts about that?
It's funny. I remember thinking when I started this Tableau journey, probably 9 years ago, that I would set up all these interactive dashboards. I would automate the back end of it, deliver data to it, and I'd be able to go to the golf course and play golf all day, and it would be amazing. But it's just not turned out that way. You know, the more information you expose to people, the more questions they have. And if I've learned anything over the years, is that no single dashboard can ever answer all the questions that are out there. So I don't think that interactive visual analysis is going away. I agree it's going to increase that, you know, the more data products you put in front of somebody, the more questions that people are going to have. With that said, we are moving more towards like a person level attributed KPI sort of analysis with a metric framework that we're building. You know, we want to do things that are in a really scalable way. And so there's a single place that people can go to for information that's relevant to them, that we're pushing, and have the ability to customize that experience to the user based on who's actually logged into it, offer full transparency. So there's never any question about how something is built. But then when they have that next level of question, the data sources that are behind this thing are available to use for more traditional kinds of dashboards. So you can ask more questions. And then if those dashboards don't answer all your questions, then there are self-service data sources behind these things too that people can access. So I think it's going to increase, not decrease over the years, just because there's going to be more demand.
Yeah, I also think there's an element, not to count on anybody else, but where as people age out of the workforce and age into the workforce, you know, it's just more knowledge of data and how to use data and computers and coding and programming. It's almost a native skill. I mean, what our kids are learning in school, you're like, I didn't really learn that until high school or college, what have you. So I think the skills are going to be better too. And so to be hands-on with the data, it's kind of like, I remember when I started my first job, my boss used to long handwrite out his letters and then give it to a secretary to type. Like, yeah, you don't see that ever anymore. And I think the same thing. I mean, people talk about that, but I do think there's an element that people are going to be a little better with data and just doing it themselves and wanting to do it themselves, even at executive levels, not being super coders or supervisors, but being, you know, reasonably competent, I think. So I don't know. You know, you guys have a thought on that too.
Yeah, I think when I read this question, you know, to me, it really becomes kind of like contextual in terms of, well, what industry are you in? Or, you know, how has your company grown? Or, you know, how data savvy or data literate is this space that you're in? You know, I think there are plenty of industries where, you know, data and analytics means Excel still today. And something like Tableau is revolutionary, and you show them a bar chart and they think it's amazing. But there's other industries like banking and healthcare where data is just the fabric of what they do. So in my mind, that's where I go. That's what I think. Point and click, I think, will be around. It is super helpful for us, and but I am very excited about these other things. And that's where, obviously, as a technologist, as someone who wants to help a company accelerate faster, I hope we get to these things. Now, will it be in 5 years? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I definitely think it depends what industry, because there are some industries that are farther along in the democratization of data. and in which case there's just I've seen dashboard burnout, where people now, they've been around data and analytics and insight, and they want to start going to that kind of quote next level with natural language processing, or you talk about streaming anomaly detection. I see that in industries that are a bit more advanced. But then the industries that maybe aren't quite as farther along, it is very much where a dashboard can give insights that they previously never had. Something simple of just logistics or sensors in a manufacturing plant. In that case, dashboards are going to be very, very useful for those organizations still within the future.
Yeah, so I'll summarize this real quick and then move us to the next one. I think it'll be interesting to as we bring it all together, the combination of the visualization with the narrative. One of the things that I think that is really powerful about data storytelling, and Steve was sharing this a minute ago, was when you look at the narrative and the visualization, when you bring them together, they are greater than the sum of their parts from an impact perspective. And so I think, as y'all are all kind of saying, the visualization is not going to go away, but it's going to change, and how it changes, it seems like it's going to very much depend on the industry and the use case and the audience and the user and so forth. And it's going to be more tailored because it's going to know more about who it is that's looking at it on the other end. And so I love that piece. Our next question digs into a little bit of a pathway. And so we believe a simplified pathway toward a data-driven culture is to take analytics, which feeds into an insight, which dictates or leads to a strategy. Once the strategy becomes executed as a part of an organization, that leads to a particular culture. And when the culture is thriving with data that they've learned from, that is ultimately, quote, success, right? And so in order to achieve that success, an organization must transition from simply learning something insightful to actively doing things differently by infusing the changes into their culture. Rachel, we'll kick it off with you this time. How do you see successful organizations gaining that buy-in where the analytic insight changes the culture of the organization from the inside out?
Yeah, that's a really simple one, and it just results in execution. So if analytics insight increases revenue, or finds missed sales opportunities, or can increase automation, which saves overhead, those are the types of numbers and actual business execution that leadership pay attention to, and that actually then will push that culture throughout the organization and find success.
Do you have any tips on winning the hearts and minds as the analytics leads to that insight, which then kind of leads to culture and infusing, hey, we've learned this, and now we want to go and share it and actually change the way the culture actually functions?
Yeah, so my experience has been when you actually can make someone's job easier, then they tend to become a big fan of analytics and what you do. So there are sometimes organizations that kind of see analytics as overhead, or yeah, we have to do that. But if you can actually go into a room and with a user or a leader and actually make their job easier, then absolutely they become your biggest fans. I have been part of projects where some of the most active dissenters, or the people that were the most negative at the beginning of the project, when they actually started realizing that they spent less time manipulating data, or they spent less time trying to remediate to systems, or they had actual insights where they were able to close a sale faster, then those people have become my best friends. And they're advocates for the power of it. And then they actually become really active, where I've had those people that were the strongest dissenters then subsequently turn and say, hey, I've got a really good idea where we could expand, or what about this? And then that naturally builds that culture throughout the organization.
That's awesome. Nick, you and Mark were both really passionate about this. What would you like to add here?
Um, yeah, I think so. I agree, and I think what Rachel was explaining is almost kind of an organic, bottom up kind of successful implementation of analytics. I think again, I got to take it back to the context for which you're working in, and go well. Oldcastle's grown by acquisition for many years, which poses certain challenges. And so for us, I feel like it almost had to go the opposite way. It had to kind of come top down, and we had to look at gaining alignment so that we could partner with the correct leaders across the business and gain consensus. And then that allowed us to provide insight to narrow that insight, and then have a strategy and achieve kind of the culture change that we're talking about here.
Yeah, so from my perspective, and being at Piedmont for nearly 11 years now, I've definitely seen our organization shift to being very data-driven. And I'd like to be able to take credit for that and say, it's owing to the BI program that we built and all the cool technology that we put in place. But the truth is, it just wasn't. There's a part of it. And I think that the grassroots approach of, trying to show people a better way of doing things and being more efficient can help and is necessary for the whole picture to be successful. But you're just ultimately not going to be successful at a company if your executive leadership team isn't data driven. And that really was the tipping point for us. We got in some executives that were very data driven in the way they approached things. They valued what we did. They were very focused on KPIs, what metrics are driving our organization, which then forced the leaders to be very data driven. On top of that, from a technical, leadership standpoint, you've got to have a good balance of having a bold vision for somebody to follow, but being able to balance your stables and your volatiles in your organization. And if you're not familiar with that concept, there's a blog called Rands and Repros that talks about it. And I think it's really good insight to look at your technical staff and try to make sure that you can break free of the status quo, but also build something that's scalable and works. So it's really going to be both things. It's going to be from the technical side, pushing to have a COE grassroots approach, but also making sure you're in an organization where the executive leadership values what you do and wants to be a data-driven organization.
Yeah, it does seem like you need both bottoms up and top down. And without either, it's so much more of a struggle. I mean, Rachel, and I've seen those stories, and when, the organization doesn't support it, but you still have some departments or some users or some people that are making some great stuff happen, and they can, but they kind of can't get it to grow past what they, what they're in control of, or, their world. But when you have that sort of fostered environment from management executive who's like looking for those opportunities to bring those wins and those successes forward and show people how it does make their jobs easier and their lives easier, and they get promotions and they're smarter and the more success. Boy, when that comes together, it's an unbeatable combination. But it really does help tremendously to have both those things.
We have a question, if you guys don't mind me stepping in. This is a great question from Brooke, and it says, how do you handle situations where people in analysis positions that do much of their work manually seem to be threatened by automation capabilities of BI?
Can I take that?
Absolutely.
So first of all, I think this question actually goes to a broader context, because there's a lot of jobs out there that get threatened by the automation of data, right? And seeing it in several different industries. And so I think what helps is showing people that it doesn't threaten your job. It gives you the ability to do more. It gives you the ability to do something new. And then if there's people in your organization that don't want to be continual learners, then that's something you should consider whether or not that's a part of your culture you want to have, you know. But yeah.
I totally agree, Nick. I think, you know, if you're running into people that see automation as a threat, maybe they're not a right fit for the culture that you're trying to build. You really want people that see that as an opportunity. Wow, if I didn't have to do, you know, spend 2 weeks out of the month pulling data and manipulating in a spreadsheet or something, I could then move on to do this other role, and it gives me more opportunities in the organization to show my value. I think those are the people that you want to have in your company culture.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that hero mentality, right? They want to be the hero. That's not necessarily what drives a business forward. It really moves the needle.
Yeah.
I know I certainly remember when I first got into Tableau, I kind of said, you know, I feel like I used to do 80% of my time on data prep and 20% of my time analyzing it. And one of the things that I've always said to, you know, clients or people I've worked with is, what if we could spend 80% of our time analyzing the data and just 20% of our time prepping it and getting it ready for that analysis? What could we learn about our organization that would help it thrive if we had that truly in that capability in our hands? And so I'm right there with you. We're going to skip through number 3. This is actually number 4 is a very interesting one in kind of the same vein as organizations are trying new things in the analytics space. The question says, what suggestions do you have for doing decision intelligence, which basically means, is it working? Who needs to be at the table? What tips can you share for beginning with the end in mind? In context, Gartner defines decision intelligence as a framework to help data and analytics leaders design, model, align, execute, monitor, and tune decision models and processes in the context of business outcomes and behaviors. Anybody want to step up to the plate on that one?
I'll start. So who should be at the table is absolutely stakeholders, from the users to the leadership. The projects that I've seen be most successful are the projects where users are to some extent involved in the beginning, because ultimately they're the consumers of it. And so if the product doesn't fit your need, or it doesn't fit their need, or it's difficult to use, no matter how great the insights may be, people won't use it. And then I've seen projects that have just died because of that. So I think all of the panelists have really echoed with starting with the users in mind, and how are they using it, in what environment, what are they looking for, just the nature of when they interact or how often they may interact with that. So that absolutely has to be a beginning point to design any type of analytics project.
For us at Piedmont, we have a corporate purpose that says that we want to have a positive impact on every life we touch. You know, it's not exactly tied in specifically, you know, with healthcare. You could read that and think, you know, I don't really know what industry you're in. It's very similar to Chick-fil-A's corporate purpose. So I'm sure Karen recognizes elements of that. And we, I think, kind of borrowed that from y'all to some extent. But we build everything around that. And we have a plan on a page that at the center of that is quality. And that's quality and service of the patient, surrounded by stewardship and strategic growth, and ensuring we have the right talent in place. We build everything around that. You know, what are the outcome metrics that influence our ability to achieve our purpose and live up to the goals that are on our plan on a page? And we have operational metrics that surround those things. And so that helps us answer the question, is this working to actually influence those outcome metrics? But it's really important to ensure that when you're delivering this data, it's to people that have the power to do something about it. If you're giving people data and pretty dashboards that are really cool and they don't have the power to make actual change as a result of the indicators they see in the data, then it's not going to make a difference. You're just making pretty pictures for people to look at.
Yeah.
I love that you attach you attach it to your purpose. Like that's so great. And then of course change. You know, like what's the point if you can't change things? You know, give people the power to change. I think that's so critical. And I think change is hard for people. And so I also think how do you know who needs to get to the table? Rachel, you're right on the money. That feels so right. Getting to the beginning in mind. With the end in mind, beginning with the end in mind, is also about the change in the people and preparing and letting them have all the resources and the time they need to change. It's going to take people time to figure out how to use data if they've never used it before, how to make sense of the data, how to make a finding. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to have basic analytics that are going to be, not that impressive, but still important. And I think there's also that element of like, if you're thinking about the users with as the end in mind, what the change they can enable is make sure you're supporting them in every way to have that time and the resources to change to use data and then to make changes with data. So I love that you start with your purpose in particular, Mark, because that's where you want the changes around, serving the purpose.
Yeah. I want to speak to a couple other pieces of this question. So the first part's, what suggestions do we have for doing decision intelligence? I think one thing is it's great if you can have a culture of what Steve was pointing out at the beginning of the meeting, which is please challenge my thoughts. If you have a culture where you can disagree with one another and ask questions, that helps so much. Because it's that shared pool of knowledge that really makes any dashboard or analysis that much more valuable. And so that has to exist on both sides, right? The technologist maybe doing the development has to be willing to take that feedback that, hey, this doesn't really get at what we're trying to answer or whatever. In the business, it has got to be receptive to, hey, I understand you want this, but this is kind of like what we're seeing in the data, and and kind of having that healthy conflict, it really brings out the best. I also think it really helps to be aligned when you're trying to put in a process together with the analytics. And I think that's a lot what Mark was talking to. It's like, okay, we want to go reform, the way we do sales or the way we do whatever we do, and thinking about, okay, what kind of process change does this take, and what kind of analysis would we need to do to help people see that this is the way forward? So
I think y'all did a great job with this one. Nick, you kind of closed it out and talked about the alignment and the ability to disagree. And I think that to disagree and still walk out the door with everybody's heads held high in a respectful way, knowing that we're all working together. And I think that does a great job of leading us into our next question, which is historically, the common organizational challenge in this space has been the balance between data governance and data democratization. And you could also kind of say between IT and the business. How has the relationship between IT and the business changed? And what does success, win-win, look like in the long term? What does the business need to understand better about what IT is trying to do? What shifts in thinking are required from IT as we consider the needs of the modern analyst? I think each of you sit in different places in your organizations. Nick, maybe have you kick this one off and then go back around the horn here.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I feel like so much of this is just trying to bridge the gap between the technologists and the business. As a technologist, my core interests are doing super cool things with computers and data, right? I'm like super entrenched. I want to read all the nerdy articles I can get my hands on. And I can get lost in that and lose sight of, okay, at the end of the day, we make concrete products that go in the ground, and there are a lot of core, order to cash processes, and manufacturing processes that I need to know so that all the cool stuff I'm reading and learning and want to apply fits and is making us better. And so from a technologist side, it's like, okay, it's awesome to know this stuff, and that's a really cool idea, but how does it make us better? And on the other side, I think the business doing whatever they can to say, be, like we've talked about a little bit, data literate, or okay, understanding the different systems that have to come together, or that maybe all the data doesn't live in one place, or that, if I'm pulling from multiple systems, there's got to be a way to tie it all together. So I think it's bridging that, almost that personality gap, and being one culture and one mindset.
Yeah, and it's also, totally right on the money there, because it's really like you just need each other. You just need each other. I used to characterize it as form versus substance. Like, if you don't have any form to your substance, then your substance is just all over the place. And if you just have form and nothing's flowing through it, then what's the point? You know what I mean? So IT being form and bringing formality and making things possible, and business being, I know what this means. I know that when I see this kind of data record or whatever, it means a sale happened, or it means something happened. So you really need both. And you're just so reliant on each other. And I think what's changed so much is, in the old days, I admit it, I'm guilty of like, let me put a server under my desk, and how can I avoid IT as long as possible before I run into a brick wall, which always happens, that always happens. And then on the other side, the IT side, it's sort of like, get out of my database, or get out of my data warehouse. In the old days, you're just a user. This is my beautiful data warehouse and database. I don't want you using it. So seeing both sides become enlightened toward the needs and the interdependencies of each other over the last many years has been amazing. And I was telling Nelson, in the earliest years of Tableau, I used to talk about the old school IT and old school thinking about analytics, and enlightened IT, like the early people, like the people that are in this group, like Mark and Nick and so many, Nelson and Paul. They're just like thinking about technology as like such the thing, such the enabler, but really this interdependency. I think the more people realize how interdependent we are on each other, the more you realize what's good for him or her is also going to be good for me. And sometimes we might have to compromise and, argue and disagree and whatever, and prioritize. But at the end of the day, I think more and more people realize, like, I can't be successful if I'm not successful together with the business and IT together. You definitely see that across the companies I talk to. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, I could definitely talk for a while about this, but I'll be brief on my feedback. I think what's really important is regular and transparent communication to build trust between these groups. For us, that means constructing ourselves into agile sprint teams around certain business functional areas, and having all of those people in the room together, planning their work in 2-week increments so that everybody understands what everybody's doing, and giving regular communication about progress. For that's helped us tremendously.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think just to add, I think one of the biggest things that we can do as IT is really to simplify for the business. I think a lot of us in data and tech tend to get really excited. We see the potential, and then we go off of this deep end of technical conversation. And for a lot of people, their eyes just glaze over, and then they don't feel vested in it. They feel like it's some kind of department that's just sucking money out of the company, or, just whatever's going on over there, I want to completely avoid because I feel so confused. So I think one of the biggest things really in the shift of thinking with IT is, don't think of it as IT versus business, but it really is a collaboration. And to simplify that in terms that the users will understand.
Yeah, to wrap this up, I love everything that y'all spoke about here, and we have certainly used kind of beginning with the end in mind as one of the things that we have talked about as a part of this conversation, which is habit number 2 from 7 habits. I think the habit here is synergy, and the idea that when we go together, we actually multiply each other. We can be a magnifying force when we're aligned, but when we're fighting each other, we create negative energy. There's a whole nother theory and thought around, nothing moves faster than the speed of trust. And when the business and IT don't think that they have each other's best interest in heart, there creates that sense of distrust, right? And so to wrap us up, I want to close with this one because it's going to feed really well into Paul's conversation. So this is our last question. So while artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning, ML, continue to create buzz in the space of data science and analytics, many organizations continue to live in spreadsheets, creating a widening gap in the analytic maturity model between different organizations. When it comes to creating a data literate culture at your organization, what should be the ultimate goal? What is your expectation of proficiency for the majority of your people, and why is this important?
Want to nominate anybody?
Elissa, you start us. Maybe you close us out.
Oh, sure. To me, it's like, what is your expectation for proficiency for the majority of people, or what's the ultimate goal? It's like, what immediately popped in my head is every decision asking the right questions of data, getting the data and asking the right questions. Now, there might be questions, or at least looking for the data, or looking for the kind of data-driven questions. And you might find there's lots of decisions, or there's really important decisions that have no data or no relevant data. But the fact that you could get your culture and your people to first think, well, what are the facts? Let's look at the data. Is there data to support this? I think it would be the mark of a successful data literate culture. The fact that it's like their first instinct is to go to the data, not to make that the data make the decision, to have the people make the decisions, but to be informed by the data, to be informed by facts. Because there's so many instances where companies aren't like that. In fact, Nelson, you were saying 80-20, where you're 80 prep and 20 analyzing, and now you can do 80 analyzing. Well, the same thing happens without data and influencing every decision. It's like 80% opinions and 20 and conversations that go nowhere, and 20% finally doing something about that. But when you have the data and the facts at the center of the table, everybody's looking at it, everybody understands how to look at it, everybody asks good questions about the data, you can spend 20% of your time, arguing about the data, and then 80% strategizing about what we're going to do about this decision or this problem. So I think it's just like, if your culture turns to data first, even when it's not there, but thinks data first and wants to use data to inform themselves to make better decisions, that seems like a data literate culture to me. I don't know if you guys, it's been a while since I've been practicing it, but yeah. But Rachel, yeah.
I'll hop on to that. I definitely agree, starting with the question. But I would add on to that a data literate culture, in my opinion and my experience, is a culture which actually can have an action item or conclusion from that data. So it really doesn't, there's not much value in just sitting around and analyzing data every day if there's never any kind of outcome from that. So I think that a true data literate culture is, yes, starting with the question and having a culture of questioning, but also then saying, well, okay, what is the action or the knowledge that we're going to take to actually change from now what we know?
And I could just give some practical things that we're doing to try to achieve greater data literacy here at Piedmont. I think it's really important to establish a COE that promotes the use of data assets. We have monthly Tableau training courses that we offer from beginner to advanced. Pre-COVID, we were going to all of our hospitals once a year and doing these data palooza events where we were available to data consumers that wanted to ask questions, and we were there to immediately give them answers, and we saw really good feedback from that. We would schedule time with our developers and be able to get answers really quick, and perhaps even throw some dashboards together on the fly to assist them. But roughly half my team is what we call embedded BI developer, where they make themselves available to Tableau desktop users in the organization. We currently have a ratio of about 1 to 40 Tableau desktop users, 1 BI developer to 40 Tableau desktop users, which is probably a bit much to expect from somebody, but our regular kind of engaged users might have time scheduled with those EBI folks to clear hurdles and provide education. Machine learning is one of those things that's on here too, and I expect machine learning projects to mature about like analytical dashboards did. people 8 years ago didn't really necessarily know what a dashboard was and how it would be useful. Right now, people are in the same place with machine learning, but as we get some of those projects under our belt, we think that those project requests will be almost as common as dashboard requests.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll comment on is why is this important? I think it's important to have data literacy because you know, every day we get requests for, hey, can we do this or can we do that? And a lot of times they're not thinking about the data impact. If you start using your, you know, transactional database or system in a way that it, you know, is going to change the data, then your insights are diminished. And so it's important to kind of weave this data literate culture so that you know, the insights can be actionable, they can be insightful, they can be trusted, you know. But it is a challenge to get everybody to a point where you know, they don't want to take the easy way, they want to do it the right way so that we can continue to propel the business forward.
Yeah, I love that. So just, I think the big piece here that I think all of you said in one form or fashion is that we got to take these ideas and these words and we got to put action behind it, right? If we can't change the process, if we can't actually have an effect on the organization, it's going to frustrate bright and talented people. They're going to go do something else where they actually can have that impact. And ultimately, I think we all desire to use data to have an impact. And so with that, just really super grateful to each of you. You've shared so much time with us. You've shared so much wisdom with us on this panel. I'm grateful to you personally for the time you spent talking to me on each one of these questions, and just grateful that we had an opportunity to share that with this community. So